precipitation event. And what we can do, I'll play this again, is move our sliding window here to select that time range. And all the other visualizations filter for those, for that selected time period. And we can get a sense of trends across elevation, wind patterns, and temperatures, et cetera. Using the map, we can also flip through different precip types using the radio buttons to see the sensors that are available at different stations. And as you all know, I'm sure, weather stations at valley bottoms might not be as representative of higher elevations. So we can also use the elevation chart here to filter for higher elevation stations and get a sense of what's going on at tree line and above. And once we go through all of that, we can get to the point where we need to find some more refined details. And so to do that, we can mouse over each individual station and then get a sense of the telemetry readings at each individual station. This is really important because there's a variety of different sources of error that can occur at weather stations that need to be diagnosed that won't show up in the aggregated visualizations on the right. And that was a big lesson for me, at least. It was that the manual quality assurance is here to stay, and getting a sense of what's happening at each individual station is really important. The aggregated views, the summary statistics that we were showing, they're good for showing major events, but to get a really good sense of what's going on, going down to each individual weather station is still pretty important. All right, and the next tool I will talk about is the MIN dashboard that we created. This year with COVID, there was a lot less professional reports, and so Avalanche Canada was a lot more reliant on public recreationists to submit reports. And we needed a better way of looking at this data. So when I sat down to this, I'm not an Avalanche professional. As a public recreationist, I thought about how this tool can be improved to better view this data. And one thing that struck me was that the map and the informational views are separated. They're not linked, and it makes it quite hard to navigate where things are in space and what information I've already read. And also I found getting into the most high value information took a few steps. So to recap, I wanted to improve the navigation and orientation in the interface and highlight important information first. And so very similar to the previous visualization that I talked about, we employed multiple coordinated views. That is, we linked them interactively, and we wanted to get some overviews and some more detailed information. So to start with, well, this is the tool we created. And on the left here, you see a cluster map, which gives you a sense of the spatial patterns across the different observation types that are that users can select when they're making reports. So these donut charts, these clusters, give you a sense of how many reports are at that location and prevent occlusion. I'm sure you've seen that on the Avalanche Canada website. And the size of the circle and the number within the donut chart corresponds to the number of reports. There's also this element of the outer arc segment, and this works exactly like a pie chart, where the size of the arc segment corresponds to the percentage of observation types. And we used the color palette, recycled the color palette from the Avalanche Canada website, which you can see here in the legend. And zooming in on any part of the map reveals the underlying individual avalanche observations, or just the MIN observation reports. And they are colored, they're represented by these circles and are colored by the most important observation type that's contained within. So you might have multiple observation types in each report. And we created a priority rank order that's shown here in the legend, starting with incidents, then avalanches, then quick reports, and so on. And let me just, in the corresponding view here, we've got a scrolling MIN feed that gives you a sense of the contents of the MIN reports. And we took some inspiration from your social media site, kind of feeds that give you, basically a scrolling list ordered by time of these reports. And I want to highlight that this UI element, the humble scroll bar, is actually a data visualization. It gives you a sense of how many reports, how much content there is that you're looking at, and also where you are. So it gives you a sense of orientation. And then, of course, our details here are the actual report contents. So when looking at these reports, we wanted to highlight high value information first. So we want to make sure that we have images up there. So we added an image carousel. We wanted to have the most important observation types selected by default. So when scrolling through these, you can easily skim through that. We also found that comments are really where a lot of good information is. So we wanted to have that visible up front as well. And another thing that came up is the timeliness of min reports. A lot of times mins are submitted a few days or a day after the observation was made, and we wanted a way to highlight that just to keep track of things in people's minds. So we added this little red piece of text that gives you a sense of whether there was a delay in the observation. And of course, these things come together when we link them interactively. So I'll be walking through these interactions now. So we can get a sense of the scrolling there. But when we zoom in on the map bounds actually filter the list of reports on the right so that the two views are kept in sync, and it's easier to manage that cognitively. Similarly, mousing over individual reports scrolls to that specific report in the min feed there. So it makes it easier to browse through different mins. And finally, clicking on the compass icon zooms to the location of that min report. And doing so also changes some of the base map to show some satellite imagery, so you get a sense of the underlying terrain characteristics. So the lesson learned here it's not groundbreaking, but it's well learned, which is that simple and familiar is really effective. I think this tool was well received, and I think in large part that's because it's more simple and used a lot of familiar UI elements. To give you a sense of what we're working on now and in the future, we're starting to tackle data from the InfoX and from other sources as well. So this is a dashboard we're working on looking at avalanche observations that also include min data. I won't go into the details of this, but I'll talk about some of the lessons we're learning. And the first is that the avalanche data in general are not gathered using a random sampling approach. They're gathered using a targeted sampling approach. And what this means is that individual reports need to be visible. Each one has a story to tell, how terrain was used, where people were traveling, gives important context for interpretation. And when we do things like numerical aggregations, taking averages and counts, a lot of that story gets hidden. We don't get a sense of the survey effort that went into that report. And the other lesson is that free-form text and tables are core formats to these data. That's how they're entered, and that's how they've been read. And there's a lot of rich information that comes from this mode of communication and entering this data. And so rather than trying to remove this or fight against it, I think our designs are going to build upon and improve these and build from them and work with that type of data. So to that end, in future work, what we're looking at is ways of enhancing tables. One way we're thinking about doing this is using natural language processing algorithms, which will allow us to parse a lot of these free-form text fields and extract data from it, being able to do things like search for specific keywords, persistent weak layers, those types of things should be possible, and being able to highlight that in the actual text to make reading a little bit easier should be possible too. And we're looking at embedding visualizations where there is structured data as well. We're also looking at ways of using some of these principles, interactive visualization, visual analytics, to better manage collaboration in avalanche hazard assessment. So one thing we've observed as a challenge at Avalanche Canada is managing handoffs during shift changes. And another thing that could be useful, we keep coming back to, is tracking snowpack stratigraphy and persistent weak layers using representative graphical snow profiles. And there's been some talk about using this as a public communication tool as well. And finally, we're looking at introducing these tools to new user groups, trying to understand how they might translate to other professional organizations, different operational contexts, and how recreationists might use them. And I think we can take some pointers from my colleague's research. Katie Fisher, who spoke yesterday, has been doing a lot of research understanding how recreationists interpret the bulletin, and how she's been a huge advocate for using interactive tools for educational purposes. And I think we can take some lessons from that. And also, Amelie's work, who's presenting tomorrow, is also looking at why users use social media websites. And I think that might hold some clues for understanding how these interactive tools might better serve that community. So I want to thank our supporters and our funders, and I want to acknowledge everybody who's been working on this project on the AvID team, my supervisor council at SFU, and all the external consultants, and everyone who's given feedback and helped with this project. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dan. I think you've provoked a lot of thought. I know Stuart and I were texting back and forth during our during your presentation. Brent, are there any hands up in the crowd?
We currently have no questions from the floor, Joe.
Okay. Well, the one thing. I think I see.
We got one
there.
So Andy Lewis, go ahead, Andy.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Really like the tool. I did a similar thing about 10 years ago, really rudimentary, and the JavaScript framework available at the time was impossible to find a windrows, for instance. So yeah, I really like that. Wondering about the min reports, whether you've considered giving some kind of way of rating or weighting the person who submits the report as a data point, because sometimes they're really novice kind of reports, and other times they're really trustworthy kind of reports. Whether that's something you've given any thought to.
You know, I think in the conversations that I've had with the forecasters, there's a lot of useful data in there. Even just the images are high quality data, no matter the level of experience that the user has. And so I think that's generally where the conversation has gone. I don't know about rating user competence. I think there was also some talk about having professionals be able to self-identify as professionals when they're submitting reports to the Mountain Information Network. So that might be a way of distinguishing folks in that medium. I think personally, in my view, it's the Mountain Information Network as a network has an opportunity to help people learn how to become better as you know, in making their observations. And so there's an opportunity to provide some feedback there, in my opinion. That's just my a non-professional opinion.
Thank you.
We have another question from the floor from Judson Wright. Go ahead, Judson.
Hey, you got me now? Looks like I just chimed in now. So I was just wondering if there was any thought had gone into the possibility of on min reports having it linked to something like a snow profile or snow pilot type program where users are able to graph plots right in a min report.
We haven't really talked about that, but that sounds like a great idea. I think that would be a really useful tool to get people to start thinking about ways of really imagining and mentally visualizing the snowpack. So I think that'd be, and also gathering, good hard data from the public. That'd be great.
Yeah, I think the public is just getting better and better at this type of stuff. And then I think more and more guides are starting to use the min reports as well. So just having that form right there, almost like a bit of an open source program, would be amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. Thanks for those comments, Judson. Are there any other questions from the crowd, Brent?
No more questions on the floor currently, Joe.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Stan. Much appreciated. And I think you've provoked some thought again with your presentation. So I'm sure folks can follow up in the chat if there's additional things they want to chase. So thanks a lot for today.
Great. Thanks so much.